So why doesn't every school have a drama teacher? Theater is all about stories, and human beings are storytellers. What if school was actually about bringing learning to life through stories? True stories that open up worlds and teach us about people and places and ideas, and imaginary fables that teach us lessons and bring us places we might not otherwise go. Even informational stories help us deepen our knowledge and understanding of who we are in our individual and collective stories. But accessing those stories requires becoming literate. Students need to be able to read, write, speak, and communicate. And theater can help them do that. So most of us, especially if you're a strong reader, probably don't remember learning how to read. It's something that just sort of happened, right? And if you're a struggling reader, it's likely you have a lot of strategies to help you get by. And you might not even really know why they work, they just do, right? I learned something somewhat recently that blew my mind. We're not actually meant to read, right? Written language is a human invention, so we actually have to repurpose parts of our brain for the task of reading. So without going too far in the neuroscience rabbit hole, the takeaway here is that reading is actually a complex cognitive process that doesn't happen naturally. So you can't just learn to read, you actually have to be taught. So while we are not wired for reading, we are in fact wired for storytelling. Our brains are wired for oral language, and oral language is the foundation of learning to read. So I actually remember learning to read. I was about 4 years old, and I had a book about Santa, and Santa was coming to town, and at the bottom of the page it said, "Hurry, hurry." And I looked at those words, and these little squiggles suddenly came to life and had meaning, right? The reading specialists call this alphabetic insight, which I love. And I grabbed the book and I ran around to every adult I could find and I said, "Look, I'm reading, hurry, hurry." And they said, "Oh, that's nice." I said, "Hurry, hurry." I don't think they understood. This was a big deal, right? But I understood in my little 4-year-old brain, something had just opened up the universe to me. And from that point on, I was very much had an identity as a reader. And I would read and I would write, and I was so fortunate in so many ways. My mother was an elementary school teacher. I had books in the house everywhere, and I was recently reminded I had the same teacher in 3rd and 4th grade. Shout out to Mrs. Fitton. And she was my biggest fan. She would say things like, "Deborah has a fine mind." And it was a joy to help her grow for 2 years. And it makes such a big difference to have a teacher like that in your corner, especially in those critical years. I would publish my own books using the school's binding machine, and I was acknowledged at Young Authors Night. I think I peaked in 5th grade when I won the spelling bee. I was a reader and a writer, and I was good at school. And as my fellow nerds might relate, this isn't always great for the whole social life thing. Take it in. I was awkward. I had really thick glasses. My sister was adorable. I was full of insecurities. And if I could have just stayed in my books and in my journals and hung out there, that would have been great. But unfortunately for me, I'm really social. So I kept trying to find my tribe. And I would join group after group in middle school and high school. And I think in part because I always wanted to make sure I had one to fall back on when one other one inevitably pushed me out. But that all changed when I found theater. And when I was a part of the drama club, it was me and all the other misfits. We found community together. I was able to hang out with people who were of different ages and different backgrounds, and we shared that thing together. And it's one of the main reasons I actually went on to become a youth theater director and a drama teacher. To be able to give that safe space, that experience that I got of finding myself in that way. I wanted to pay that forward. And if that were the only reason to be an advocate for the arts and education, that would be enough, right? That strong social emotional foundation, that safe community to belong to, right? Engaging students in school. But what I've learned is that there's so much more than that. The more I learn about literacy, the more I learn about how reading and theater actually can support each other. So I actually started working with kids when I was still in high school. I was assistant directing the 6th grade play when I was a sophomore in high school. And so by the time I graduated, I had 3 full productions under my belt. I had groups of students that were just mine that I got to direct. I was choreographing and staging ensemble numbers of like 120 kids. In hindsight, who lets a 16-year-old do that? But I am so grateful to the mentors and directors that I had who saw the leader in me that I didn't yet see in myself. So I never stopped doing that work. All through college, I got a degree in theater, and I went on to work as a professional director and stage manager, and I kept teaching after-school classes and drama class in summer camps. And I never thought about this as teaching. It took me a long time to see myself as an educator. But when I started to notice that certain things that had always worked with my students were starting to be a struggle, I found myself looking for reasons why. And I started to talk to their classroom teachers, who actually were noticing some of the same things. I was noticing, for example, my 6th grade students could no longer work independently on a scene. They needed a lot of redirection and increasingly direct coaching. I noticed that my 8-year-olds, I used to be able to give them a first line and a last line and say, make up a scene, and they would just do it. Very little coaching. In fact, the 8-year-olds are the one who taught me that game way back. And now, I would give them the lines, and they would just stare at me. What do I do now? Where do I start? And I thought, I'm doing the same activity, the same age, sometimes even the same school setting, but these kids are now struggling with the task. What changed? What's going on? So I started looking at what they were doing in the classroom or not doing in the classroom, and it struck me that these students couldn't work independently because they hadn't learned how. They had not been practicing that skill. These students couldn't improvise or make up stories because they hadn't been given the chance to do so in school. So suddenly, this extracurricular thing I was doing for fun with them after school became the only space in which these students were allowed to collaborate and create and improvise without fear of failure or getting it wrong or being somehow penalized for the wrong answer. What I was doing with them suddenly felt important, and more than that, maybe necessary. And that's what moved me into the world of arts integration. It's important for me to stop here and point out that I believe firmly in the importance of arts experiences for their own sake. Go to the ballet, go to the museum, go see a good play. And arts education deserves time in its own right. Learn how to work with clay, take a drama class, play an instrument. But arts integration is a horse of a different color. Arts integration is the idea of an art form, for example, theater, and an academic subject area like literacy, and how the learning together can create learning in both, right? So when done well, this is what my colleague Cynthia Weiss calls an elegant fit, right? Where the learning in both the arts and the academic discipline are improved. So I turned a corner in which I started thinking of myself as what's called a teaching artist, right? So someone who is a practitioner in their art form, as well as someone who inhabits the education space. We're sort of a bridge between the two. So I started working, in education, there's a lot of talk about these so-called 21st century skills, right? What tech people might call power skills. Collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and of course, creativity. Here's the thing. We're kind of well into the 21st century, so these aren't future nice-to-have skills. These are must-have-now skills, right? And this is the next most important way that theater supports literacy, really all learning, is that theater arts inherently and implicitly grow these skills. Theater relies on effective communication. Right? From the director's vision to the designer's choices to the actor's delivery. Without communication, the whole thing falls flat in an audience. Right? Comprehending text involves deep and complex critical thinking when an actor has to work with a script and make that character come to life. The directors, the designers, the actors, the playwrights, even the production staff all have to collaborate to make a show happen, right? Teachers spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to build these skills in their classrooms. Experiences in the theater arts do it for them. This is why you start to see more schools turning STEM into STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Because engineering without design and technology without vision fails to offer anything meaningful to the world. And the last point on these skills that I want to point out is the idea of creativity, right? And the definition that really that resonates with me is this idea of creativity as engaging the imagination to make connections and generate original ideas. It's actually just our brains doing what they do, say the neuroscientists. Notice I didn't say anything about artistic ability. So to reiterate, our brains are wired for storytelling and oral language. Engaging the imagination and creativity, students need to be able to critically think, collaborate, and communicate effectively. I can't think of anything better to do this than theater. Hits all our marks. So I started working with educators. I started working alongside teachers in the classroom to help them access the tools of theater to reach their students. And what I've found is across the board, teachers are passionately committed to the success of their students. And they instinctively know that this is how students learn best. But they are constantly being bombarded by competing demands for their time and their attention, and they struggle to fit it all in. Reading is often taught as skills in isolation, and we do need to explicitly teach foundational skills, but we also need to give them authentic context in which we can apply the skills that students are learning. My colleague Kurt Wooten says we need to give students a reason to read, right? Theater can do that. I think arts integration is really what we just used to call good teaching, but we spent so much time separating the arts and creativity from the curriculum in service of things that we need to test, that we are now struggling to find ways to get it back in. And I think that's the secret to getting the time back. We just need to reintegrate the curriculum. And I think about my own experience as a theater kid and a strong reader. And I think I could go into an audition and do a cold read of a script. And the only thing that messed me up was my own insecurities, not my struggle to pull that print off the page. And so knowing what I know now, I think about all of these students I could have helped if I even just had that basic literacy skills knowledge. Imagine if every youth theater director, every drama teacher had basic foundational literacy skills knowledge. Or imagine if every elementary school teacher had basic drama strategies. We might not be able to get a drama teacher in every school, but we can get a little drama in every classroom. And I think about one student in particular. She started with me doing shows when she was 6. And at that time, she couldn't read at all. It's hard when you give a script to someone and say, learn lines, and they can't read. So she would do her best, and she would hold the lyrics maybe upside down sometimes. But she was so smart, and she was so funny, and she was a natural on stage. And she did shows with me for years. Bigger and bigger parts, which means more and more lines to learn and more song lyrics to memorize. And she and her best friend would take the songs home and they would practice them for hours, driving their parents crazy. But you couldn't tell that she was struggling with reading because she was motivated. She was in it to win it. And when I saw her in her middle school play, my heart, I was so proud of her. She was the lead in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka, on stage the whole time. So many lines, and she rocked it. And I found out that she had been diagnosed with a reading disability in elementary school. But that didn't stop her from getting into that script and making those parts come to life. I have a gazillion of those stories. But I think about her, and I think about all of those students that we can reach through giving them those opportunities. She's actually getting ready to graduate from high school. And her parents have noted that those early experiences really set her up for success. So I know in my bones, not because of a test, that this is going to make a difference, right? So, drama actually comes from the Greek word dran. It means to do or perform. It literally means action. We can bring learning to life through drama in ways that engage all of our students with meaning and purpose. And this is the last point I want to make, is this idea that engaging in an artistic process is a process that is as much about the journey as it is about the destination. So you don't show up to rehearsal on the first day and expect the show to be done. Just like you don't expect students to show up on the first day of school and have all the answers, right? In fact, professional actors will often call the first day of rehearsal the first day of school. Learning is a journey, and it is messy, and it is painful, and it is fun. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay attention to the final product either, because don't we want to create something that we're proud of? Don't we want work that we can showcase? So imagine if every teacher, every student, every classroom embraced the messy process of learning as much as the goal of having something to be proud of at the end, not just pushing kids on to the next benchmark. Give kids something to do, and then learning naturally occurs. So this is why I now work with educators, to teach them, to teach kids to learn to read through theater. I'm not saying every class needs to be about putting on a play, and I'm not saying that every student needs to be a Broadway performer. But what I am saying is that through theater, they can be anything. Thank you.